And let's talk just for a few minutes here this morning about the consequences of sin. Romans 6, verse 23, the first 7 words of that verse says this: for the wages of sin is what? Death. Read it with me. Romans 6, verse 23. For the wages of sin, it's death. Now, death in the Bible does not mean the end of our existence, but rather it means separation. You say, now, what do you mean by that? Well, God had told Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 17 that when they ate of the forbidden fruit, they would what? Surely die. Right? Do you remember that? I read that verse last week. The Bible speaks of 3 kinds of death. You ought to jot these down. 3 different kinds of death. Number 1, there is what we call spiritual death. Spiritual death. The day that Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they spiritually died. Spiritual death is separation from the life of God. Do you remember the very first thing that Adam and Eve did after they sinned was what? They hid themselves from God. Why did they hide from God? Well, because the fellowship that they had enjoyed up to that point with God had been broken. It had been severed. Before that, God would come and meet with Adam and Eve, and they would walk in the garden together, and there was communion, there was fellowship, there was a relationship. But whenever Adam and Eve disobeyed God's word and they partook of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they ate that forbidden fruit, at that very moment they spiritually died. And according to Ephesians chapter 2, all of us are born spiritually dead. Why is that again? Because we are descendants of Adam. Adam was the representative of the human race, and because of his disobedience, he thrust the entire future generations into sin. And so there's spiritual death. Number 2, there is physical death. Physical death. Now, we know that in Genesis chapter 3, Adam spiritually died whenever he partook of the forbidden fruit. But then in Genesis chapter 5, he physically died. A physical death is the separation of the spirit and soul from the body. The proof that we are all sinners is the fact that we all physically die. There would have been no spiritual death. There would have been no physical death if there had not been sin in Genesis chapter 3, where we see the fall of man. You say, I don't like that. I don't like the thought of physical death. Well, it's all because of sin in Genesis chapter 3 that you and I experience not only physical death, but also spiritual death. Now that brings me to a 3rd kind of death that the Bible talks about, and that is eternal death. Eternal death. Eternal death, or separation from God for eternity, is the place of punishment and suffering that the Bible calls hell. Hell is the worst form of bondage because people are locked in their sin and that sin nature forever and ever. By the way, the Lord Jesus Christ says that hell is a place to avoid at any cost.